Okay, it is 8:32 and welcome to week 2 of Introduction to Criminal Law. I'm Professor Richard Wright, and I'm going to provide you with details and information concerning this week's assignments, and then I will give you a word that you need to give me to get your points. And if you want to listen, you need to, if you are here live, you need to activate audio to hear the lecture. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and you're familiar with this page because we went over this last week. And so I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom, remind you that your rubrics are in each written assignment with the exception of discussion. Your live lectures take place starting this week, every Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. You must either attend the live lecture or listen or look at the archive to get the information that's covered, as well as the keyword. But don't just turn to the lecture just to get the keyword. You want to also get the information as well. Okay, so as you can see there, the recording for the open house, which was rather extensive last week, and this session will be an hour. Okay, so now let's go over and let's look at the announcement for this week. We're going to talk about crimes against property, and I sent you the PowerPoints for chapters 3, 4, and 12 of your text, A Brief Introduction to Criminal Law, for you to have for yourself to be able to help you to digest the information and details of the chapters, and then complete the activities. What are crimes against property? Larceny, robbery, or burglary, misappropriation, trespassing, and vandalism, key terms for practice, and I'm not going to go over all of these. And then there's a practice quiz, and I encourage you to do the practice quiz because you're going to have a quiz coming up week 3, and you're going to have one week 6, which is kind of like a midterm. And all of these are timed. And I remind you that, again, our lectures, the link is in here as well. If you want to, you can just copy and paste, starting with the HTTPS all the way over to the Richard Wright, but not that period afterwards, and it will take you to this class from where we are now. So your discussion assignment, which is due tonight, February 12th by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, is robbery, burglary, and theft. Your reply post is due on Saturday, the 16th, at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And remember, I said before during the open house, make sure your discussion posts are detailed. Don't just have a few words. Don't just express an opinion, but provide some information and details. It's always nice to provide citations and references, but they're not required. And then I also indicate try to reply to as many posts as possible, because when you reply to more than one post, it helps your classmates to be able to connect with you, and then you're actively assisting each other as well. Since we don't have physical locations where we meet, because we're all over the country for this class. Finally, your written assignment, the identity theft problem, and I'm going to go over that with the rubric in just a few minutes. Again, that is due Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. That is the 17th, along with your also going to submit your keyword by Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. You'll see that in the calendar. And then you know about my motto. You know all about that by now. So now let's go to the course calendar. Course calendar is here. And it tells you where we are here. Of course, your reading assignment is, if you click on that, it opens up what I just told you a few minutes ago. Your initial post, and then your live lecture, and then your reply post for the 16th, and then your written assignment that is in the rubric and the module, which we're going to cover that, and that is due. Then you'll see that second checkbox just reminds you that your live lecture is also due by that date. If you get them in on time, you'll get 5 points with the correct word. If you don't, if you do it the 18th, you're going to get 4 points. If you do it Tuesday, 3 points. Then 2 points Wednesday. Then 1 point Thursday. Then after that, you won't get any points at all. And so that's the course calendar for this week. So let's get right into the module. Okay. And let's look at the assignments. Again, your discussion post tell you what your initial post is and then what your reply post is. Okay, I've read some of them. Some of them are pretty good. Most of them are pretty good. And then your written assignment. Now, notice this. As I remind students, okay, this week it's a two-part assignment. In the first part, you're going to provide content relating to the scenario here, and a minimum of 2-page, not counting your reference page, not counting your cover page, in which you deal with each of these issues. Now, remember, it points out that in paragraph in number 5, if you use your textbook to research the offenses, include a reference page. But I encourage you to use sources outside of your textbook, because there are sources that are available to you. We already went over that last week. APA citations in the body and references at the end. Very important. And I provide you with details as far as dealing with APA. So that's the first part. And then the second part, you're going to create a flyer, which is a 1-page document where you provide this information. And then there's a template that's provided here to help you to set it up. Now, I told you, I said you have a guide to help you. You can click on this guide and it will take you to this. And it tells you about your discussion posts. It tells you how to dealing with your weekly assignments, dealing with Grammarly, everything you need to do well in this class. There's a video to help you with discussion posts, and then it tells you all about discussion posts. So you don't have a problem dealing with that. It also tells you about your written assignments, and it provides a video to help you with that as well. It tells you how to choose a template that can help you, how to set up your assignment, and things of that nature. So everything is right there for you for this particular course so that you can be successful. Okay? So now we're back to assignments. All right? And so it tells you how to submit the assignments in a zip file, because you have two different assignments, two parts of one assignment. and then your live classroom here. So now let's go back and look at the written assignment and see again. It tells you on the left your due date, which I just told you earlier. This is this Sunday. And then here's the rubric. Now this is how you get your grades. You look at your rubric and make sure that you have satisfied your rubric. And notice this, part 1, it tells you what you have to do. It tells you about 2 pages minimum length. Make sure you run your papers through Grammarly. We discussed that last week. Paragraphs, not just one paragraph. Proper grammar, spelling. And then finally, your APA citations as well. And then sources that you use are credible sources, not Wikipedia. All right? And then you create this part 2. You're going to do a minimum 1-page flyer that on identity theft issues. And that's it. Okay? That covers your assignments for the week. Any questions, feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer them. But it's all laid out, and then I just clarified it by what I said. All right? So now let's go back and let's deal with the lesson content. So today, again, what are crimes against property, larceny? We're going to talk about these a little bit. I'm not going to go over key terms and the practice, but these are things that can help you. These 3 items down here, I already discussed that last week with you, and I'm just going to take you to them and show them. Again, this tells you the chapters that you're supposed to be reading for this week. And you got the accompanying PowerPoints that I sent you. So let's talk about what are crimes against property. Now, you should be aware right off of the bat that one of the things you'll discover about criminal law is that crimes against property don't result in as extensive a sentence if you're convicted than crimes against a person. We'll be covering that, I believe, next week, week 3. But right here, when we start talking about dealing with individuals and their property, we are talking about where individuals are victimized constantly with crime. And I've already said this before, and I'll say it again a lot of times, that there is a correlation between crime, especially crime against property, and drugs. A very strong correlation. And you will find in many times that individuals will commit crimes, particularly robbery, theft, burglary, and things of that nature to get monies to satisfy their drug habits. So I teach a course on drugs and crime, which I did a lecture earlier today. And if you ever take that J150, you'll understand more about that as well. So anyway, crimes against people, it says here, what I said earlier, are more violent and often make more headlines. Police spend most of their time reporting, investigating, though, on property crimes. And then property crimes are not intended to harm anybody except during robberies, and we'll talk about the elements for robbery in a little bit. But people lose their property. Burglary victims are sometimes there, but then the loss of property is what takes place, and it continues to escalate. And individuals have insurance to cover many of those losses, but it is still a serious problem because they have deductibles and they don't always get back. Sometimes the property is special property that that individual has, and they have some personal attachment to it, and money doesn't satisfy the replacement, like pictures or other mementos and things of that nature. But crime against property, retail theft, identity theft, vehicle theft, also dealing with individuals when they take a person's car by force and hijacking the car, or taking the car in a situation where they wrestle you out of the car, and you know what I'm talking about. And we'll talk about specifically the name of it in a minute. I know it, but we'll talk about that when we come to it. But let's talk about crimes against property and the different categories. Now, you should be aware that whenever you see the term larceny, the modern day term for larceny is theft. And theft has, let's just come down to larceny first. So larceny is an offense where the property is taken. Now, it depends on the value of the property. If the property is a little value, and there's a figure that's usually given, it is considered as a misdemeanor for theft. As Florida gives this example, if someone steals something valued at $29.99 or less, it's a misdemeanor. But if it's $300 or more, then it becomes a felony, or grand theft, as it might be called. But the bottom line is that you get more time for a felony than you do a misdemeanor. Misdemeanors are up to a year, and felonies a year and more after that in terms of time. That's the distinction. And there's things that we call petty theft. And, you know, you have identity theft, where, you know, people's identities are stolen. You're going to deal with that in your written assignment this week. And the way that happens is through the internet. It happens through people going through people's garbage and trash, receiving people's mail. You know, when you get those little offers, sometimes to offer you credit cards or loans, you have to make sure you shred those or tear those up real well, because someone can get those, change the address, and then it hits your credit, and boom. And, you know, the sad part about it is that sometimes they don't even have to have your Social Security number, but they have enough information about you that they can find. And then there's a thing called the dark web out there, where email addresses are stolen. And then you also have items, when someone sends you an email, you don't know, when you open it, it opens up what we call a Trojan, or something malicious, and it steals information from your computer. So that's how identity theft comes about, just to touch on it a little bit. Retail theft, everybody pays for retail theft because of the fact that you should be aware that there's a theory that we learn in law school that whenever something is stolen, the vendor or the owner of the company, they will then increase the price on other things, so therefore you end up paying more for it. So retail theft costs us. Retail theft can be a number of things, such as just outright not paying for the property and it wasn't given to you, or either as simple as this. I had a few cases like this where there was individuals who would switch the price tag on something to a lower price. That is a form of retail theft. And what you're doing is you're depriving the seller of the property of the amount that they're entitled to. And so that is categorized as theft. And so you find yourself going to jail, or either you find yourself getting on probation, or you find yourself going to prison and then coming out and you're on parole. The bottom line is that you end up having a record. There are also instances for example, of dealing with intangible property, such as stealing the satellite signal or either bootleg videos or bootleg songs or knockoff things like Louis Vuitton and items like that, violating copyrights and things of that nature. But oftentimes there are people who have bootleg movies. Have you ever been to the movies and you sit there and you see some people sitting down in front of you and they will have their video cameras on and they will be recording those and they send them to a computer and then they reproduce a bootleg video, which deprives the individual who took the time to create the item of monies that they're entitled to. And you can go to jail for a long time for that. Stolen automobiles, carjacking. That's what I told you I was going to tell you, when a car is taken by force from someone. But cars that are not jacked, but they're just stolen, and they end up in places like chop shops where the parts are taken. There are times when I've had this happen, I've seen it happen, where someone will steal your hubcaps, someone will steal your tires, someone will steal your headlights, all of that kind of stuff. Those are all related to theft and our property crimes. Now, the stolen property is then sold, and oftentimes those individuals, sometimes when they're involved in a chase or being pursued, there could be injury to a motorist, for example, in a car chase or something like that, resulting in great bodily harm or even death. So auto theft is a pretty serious theft. And I'm not going to go into the specifics of them, but there's vehicle theft, there's joyriding, and joyriding is generally when a person, vehicle theft is when a person steals a vehicle and they don't intend to return it. Joyriding, on the other hand, is basically where the person takes the vehicle without your consent or anything, and they just take it for a ride, and the vehicle is kept. It says here in the statute in Ohio, it says if a vehicle is returned within 48 hours, it's a misdemeanor, not a felony. In such case, there's a lack of intent to deprive. So, joyride, a lot of young people, youth, will find themselves dealing in joyriding. And then carjacking is what I was talking about a few minutes ago. It's like armed robbery, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, where it's done by force. And there are statutes like in our home state, Illinois, where a person ends up with a felony because they're using force. So it's a felony in all states. All right. So let's go to that. So now let's talk about the difference between, we talked about theft. So basically taking the property of another with intent not to return it is generic theft. Burglary is very interesting now, and you had an exercise concerning that, so I'm going to address that. So it says burglary is defined as the breaking and entering, and we call B&E, of the dwelling of another with intent to steal or commit another crime or vandalism or arson. At common law, this was before statute, and most jurisdictions now have statutes that specify the elements of burglary, but what they did was incorporate the common law elements. So at common law, burglary was initiated at a home, but now it can be done in a business by statute, and it said it had to occur in the nighttime. Now, the reason why that is thought to be a requirement is because it was considered to be done in the dark. But now that requirement is gone. Burglaries take place 24/7. Doesn't have to be in the nighttime. And it could be in a house, in a vehicle, in a business, or vessel, or any time of the day. So here's the question. How does burglary apply? Let's say, for example, if you walk by and my window is open, and you see sitting on my desk, like right here by the window, is my computer. And the window is open, or you open the window, or break the window. Either way, you don't physically come in, but you reach in and grab my computer. The question is that theft or is that burglary? Some people might say it's really theft, but actually it's technically burglary, because what you did was you reached into my home. Even if you yourself didn't do it, if you had a stick or you had some kind of pole, some kind of clip, and you grabbed it, you committed burglary. And the reason is because what you did was you broke the plane of privacy in my home. You ever heard the term, a man's home is his castle? And there are castle laws that have to do with where a person can shoot somebody because they came into their home and they can get off. But the point of the matter is that you're supposed to you're supposed to be safe in your home, and so burglary is when that takes place. All right, so that's burglary. So people get trapped sometimes by the example that I gave and say, so let's say if it's on my front porch and you grab it, is it robbery? I mean, is it theft or is it burglary? We're getting ready to get into robbery in a minute. The answer is, it's theft. No, it's actually burglary. And the reason is because it's on my private property. So it's considered as burglary as well. Now, there may be some tricks in there, but I'm just giving you the general position of far as burglary is concerned. So you should have the concept of burglary down. Now, there is a thing that called strong arm burglary, or I forget the other term it's called, where you commit a felony when you come into a home. And that's not just burglary, but it's either strong arm burglary or I'm trying to think of the other term that is used in some statutes. But anyway, the point of the matter is now you got the idea of burglary. So now let's get to robbery. Robbery, like larceny or theft, remember I said they're synonymous, is the unlawful taking of personal property, so it sounds like theft at this point, of another with intent to permanently deprive the person of that property. That's just describing theft, right? However, robbery has two more elements which are important. So it's not just intent to deprive the person of the property permanently, but it must be from the individual, not where they are, or you can see them. It must be from the person of the individual. And it must be done by force, threat, or intimidation, or violence. So a lot of people say it's described as armed robbery, or strong armed robbery, or home invasion robbery. And so that's what I was talking about, the burglary. But again, tie that to robbery. So armed robbery is, as it says here, as Wisconsin says, if the suspect used a weapon or something and says, give me your wallet or you'll be shot, this is armed robbery. Okay? So, because the individual is in fear of being injured. That's armed robbery. So let's go to next. Strong armed robbery is similar to robbery, except there's no weapon used, but the person grabs it, like snatch a purse. Let's say, for example, if you have an item on you and it's pickpocket, is that strong arm robbery? It could be. It could be argued. However, Remember, the element is that the person has to be in fear. If the person is not aware of it, it's probably not. Okay, it's going to be theft. So here's the example they give here. 17-year-old boy runs up behind a jogger, rips the wristlet away from him, and runs off with it. It says because the weapon was not displayed, but force. Remember, force is always one of the key factors that's involved here. Then the strong arm robbery takes place. So you got that? So remember that. All right. Now, home invasion. This is a form of robbery where it is so burglary, but it's more serious because of the violence that added to it. That's what I was telling you earlier. Similar to burglary, it says during home invasion robbery, an offender enters the home of another without their consent. They weren't invited in, but they use force to commit the robbery. For example, according to Florida law, the elements of home invasion robbery is intentional, entering the dwelling of another without their consent, committing robbery of the occupant therein. And the way you commit robbery, again, is, like I said again, with all of the elements, depriving a person of the property and using force and taking it from that person, of that individual. Okay? And that's robbery. Okay? So this is, you get more time from that. Remember, the closer you get to the possibility of injuring an individual or putting that individual of possibility of threat of injury, you're moving closer to crimes against a person, though you're still, the impetus of that particular crime is not the individual, but the items that are taken. So therefore, it fits in as crime of property, because the goal is to take the property. All right? And so I'm not going to click on that. All right, so you got the elements of robbery, burglary, and theft. All right. So now let's deal with misappropriation. Is similar to theft, but it could be the person have you working for them and you take it. Embezzlement, fraud, forgery, welfare fraud, identity theft, and so forth. We're going to go over those very briefly. So dealing with embezzlement. Embezzlement is when a person is placed in a position of trust and they are supposed to take care of something. Person working in a bank, they take the money as a teller or an officer or something, and they take the funds and appropriate it to their use. This is an example here. Mike is purchasing manager for a large hotel, generates invoices. He comes up with a scheme and creates fictitious business names, and basically what Mike is doing is pocketing the money and has the money sent to himself. So when this is discovered, he raked in quite a bit of money, and he is guilty of embezzlement. That's an example of embezzlement. Remember, with embezzlement, you're generally in a trust position and you violate that. It could be theft, but you're over that property. So let's talk about more specifically fraud. Fraud is done by a number of ways, by forgery, welfare fraud, identity theft, and credit card fraud. But fraud exists generally when a person, by deception, takes something. Theft by fraud of offenses encompasses various criminal acts, such as defrauding a hotel by not paying the bill, jumping out of a taxi or Uber or something like that, not paying for the food at a restaurant, you know, that's fraud. And those are the things. Fraud can also be committed in dealing with other crimes, such as taking somebody's social security number and name, but we then start moving toward identity theft to obtain a loan and purchase a vehicle, something like that. Again, it's fraud, but it's also identity theft at the same time. So you got an idea about what fraud is. Forgery. Forgery is just basically like I have a checkbook, signing my name without my consent. Now, you know, for example, somebody asked me once, they said, can I write you a check and then deposit in your account by signing your name? I said, yes, you can, because I'm giving them the intent is not to harm me, but to help me by putting the money in the account. But forgery is a fraudulent act. Remember, we talked about what fraud is, or altering the instrument. I give you a $10 check and you put another zero in there and turn it to 100 or above that. But the reason for committing forgery is usually property or financial. So states have statutes that say things like the making, altering, or endorsing of any instrument in such manner as it purports to have been made, altered, or endorsed by another, either real or fictitious. But remember, I said you got to make sure that that is not done with my consent. The Kansas forgery statute says could be applied to a case of an opioid addict who stole a prescription pad from a doctor's office and forged the doctor's signature and then gets prescriptions as well. That's forgery as well, all right? So then we get into welfare fraud. That's pretty basic, understanding where you intentionally provide false information about your ability to be able to operate so that you can get food stamps or link or something, some kind of energy assistance to help pay your utility bills or rent or something along those situations. But welfare fraud generally occurs against the state or the federal government. You submit a false claim for benefits and you're not entitled to those benefits. And that's fraud. So now we come to the identity theft. Identity theft. Identity theft is a crime, as I said, that's on the upswing because of the fact that we now have the World Wide Web, and that all states, including the federal government, have laws that relate to identity theft. And identity theft statutes generally have this information required an individual's personal information, identification information, or documents used without their consent to obtain something of value, such as take out a loan, money, use it to credit, things like that, service, or even obtain employment using a false name. Now, with the electronic era that we are in, you can be a victim of identity theft. I was a victim of identity theft some years ago when I went to a restaurant and I ended up having my meal paid for. I gave my credit card to the waiter, and the waiter took it. And you know how they commonly do it. They'll take it and they'll scan it, and then they will bring it back to you with the receipt and bill and so forth. Well, what this waiter did was he also had a little jump drive, a little thing that he could slide the strip. You know, almost all your cars now have strips, and slide the strip, and it reads the information on the card. And then that person took that information, downloaded it to a computer, and they made a fake card. And I was out of about almost $3,000, but I caught it, and then the bank reimbursed me, and then an investigation uncovered what really happened. But it can happen. I had my card in my possession all the time. But I already told you some of the ways that identity theft can take place, such as dealing with your mailings, obtaining your birth certificates, your Social Security card, your bank account information, all kinds of things. And so it's used to obtain goods, services, or anything of value. Now, it says here too that a person who's a burglar can obtain both identifying information and documents by stealing a wallet or stealing a bill even that you have, and operate on that basis. Like I said again, they change the address, and they'll send it to the company. Now, the company doesn't always operate with change of addresses, but now there are some things to combat identity theft that companies are doing. They will send you an email and or a text message, more like that, and then text the message to your phone, and then you click on that to confirm that it's you. Same thing with the computer. I have, for example, gone on a different computer to get some information on my bank, and if it's another computer or another browser that my bank is not familiar with, it will make me identify myself by sending a text or email to me. Usually I use text, and they'll send the text to my phone here, and then I'll get it, and then I'll put that code in there that's in the text, and then that way they confirm that it's me who's doing it and not someone else in another place. So, but that doesn't help if your phone is stolen, but you know what I'm talking about. So identity theft is really a challenge because it's not just a local thing, it's a national and international thing, global in nature, as it says. And so the Federal Trade Commission provides you with some information to help you be protected. And there's some articles down here which I won't take time to go over to help you deal with identity theft. But be aware that you also don't allow phishing. You know, have you ever got an email, and it's called phishing, not F-I-S-H-I-N-G, but P-H-I-S-I-N-G. And what it is a phony email. For example, I got an email that was sent to me, so allegedly from my bank. And when I got the email, it asked me to please provide my login information. Or it asked me some information that's weird. But then when I look down at the email real good, you can see misspellings, or you can see something that doesn't sit right. Well, what I always recommend to people, if you get those kind of emails, get on the phone and call your bank. And most banks have 24/7 online resources, and they have companies, they have sections that deal with fraud, and they're receiving those. And they will tell you to forward the email to them and, you know, be aware. Because if you open up some of those emails from those individuals, then you'll be opening your email, your computer up to viruses and or Trojans which steal the information. Okay, Trojans go back to the old Greek mythology of the Trojan horse that was outside of a town, and then they took the horse and brought it inside, went to sleep. While people went to sleep, inside the horse were the soldiers, and the people were ambushed. Well, that's the same thing that happens here, is that you open up something that looks innocent, and you click on it, and then you open it up, and then malicious malware and so forth is released into your computer, and it gets into the system, and it will sometimes freeze your computer. There's some, you know, that your computer becomes frozen, and then you'll get a message saying that we will not unfreeze your computer unless you pay X amount of dollars in Bitcoin or some other form. The bottom line is that here's the best policy. Don't open up emails from people you don't know. That's the best practice and policy. Okay. And then if it's from one of your creditors, make sure it's from them as well. Just because it has a link that might lead, that doesn't necessarily mean it's them either. So then we get to credit card fraud. Credit card fraud is on the rise, as you already know. People obtain credit cards in other people's name, and I told you one of the ways these offers are sent out, and individuals get those, and then they get those credit cards. Also, there's skimmers. I already told you about how that works. And then, you have a PIN, but your PIN, they figure that out. And like I said again, they got this new thing where skimmers are put on ATMs and on gas pumps, where you stick your card in, and in reality, it was just stuck on top of what that is. Whenever I go to an ATM or either to a gas station, you know what I do? I always grab the little thing that I put my card in and see if it's secure. If it comes loose, then that's just a skimmer that's on there. And what that skimmer will do is that it will generate the information from your card, and then the theft will come and remove that thing, and then they'll take it and they'll be able to appropriate your credit card and make fraudulent purposes. Happens all too often, and this happens with major banks as well. So you got to be on guard for those kinds of things. All right. So now let's talk about trespassing. Trespassing is basically a crime that's kind of like burglary, where the person goes onto property and they're not supposed to be on the property. Require the person that they are, first of all, told. Usually there's a sign like the one here: private property trespassers will be prosecuted. Put the person on notice, and that they should not come in and they're not welcome, and that it's clearly posted in that case. And some states require that it be posted. Some don't. But anyway, the point of the matter is that individual is in a place where they're not supposed to be. It says it's not typically necessary that a person knowingly trespass in a restricted area. For example, if an intoxicated person walking home becomes confused and enters someone else's residence, falls asleep on the couch, this is not trespassing because this is an intentional act. On the other hand, the intoxicated person, in contrast, the intoxicated person didn't commit burglary because there was no intent to deprive the other, and so forth and so on. Let's say you get in there and then you decide to do it. Then at that point, the intent, then it changes from that. So trespassing generally is not a felonious act. It's usually a misdemeanor, okay? Vandalism is when you just basically destroy somebody's property, damage it, and that can result in a misdemeanor crime called criminal damage to property, which includes you intend to purposely do it, not accidentally, without their consent, of the property of another. It's kind of in the form of theft, but what you're really doing is you're not taking it, you're destroying it. You can break into a place and just start to break things up and tear them up. That's where we get to vandalism, which comes in the form of criminal damage to property. Okay? So when it's accidentally damaged, it's a civil matter, but if it's intentionally done, then we deal with the criminal aspects of it. All right? So that's it. So now what you need to do is go and study. The way you study is use this again. Each week we'll give you key terms, and then you go in, and I recommend using the flashcards. And then run Adobe Flash, allow it if it doesn't open up. And by the way, we do recommend using Firefox. We highly recommend using Firefox. So let me move that here. So it says the unlawful use of force, threatened use of force, or fear directed at an automobile operator or occupant which compels them to relinquish their vehicle to the offender. And it's going to be, flip it over, and you know what it's going to be already. Carjacking. There we go. So then you go to the next one. The unlawful use of entrusted items or property of another. And you flip that over, and you see embezzlement. Then you go to the next one. And then you flip that over, and it tells you armed robbery. So these are things that can help you. You go through those, all right? So I'm going to leave those, and you'll have those each week. And let's go back down here again. Let me move this up here. Get back up there. Okay, getting down here. For practice, you can click on this, and again, set it up, and then you can start the activity. This is practice for robbery, burglary, or theft, and it helps you to do this. So you start the activity. A 17-year-old boy is walking home from school and approached by two suspects. The suspect drove him into the ground and takes his wallet. What type of crime is this? Okay, now, is this armed robbery, theft, strong arm robbery, or burglary? Remember what they did. Okay? They didn't produce a weapon. So that's the answer. Yes, it's strong arm robbery because physical force was used to take the wallet. A 14-year-old girl left her bicycle on the front lawn. In the morning, the bicycle is missing, and the family reports the crime to the police. What type of crime is this? Now, is it armed robbery? Remember, it wasn't from the person. Is it theft? Possible. Is it strong arm robbery? Probably not. So it's burglary. So it's either burglary or theft. Now, I could make an argument that it's left outside on the front lawn, that it could be burglary. But let's see if they pick theft. Let's see. Yeah. So theft is because the bicycle was taken from the victim without consent. So the best answer in this situation is theft. Though it could be argued because it was on the front lawn in their property, but that's a debatable issue. The 25-year-old man is attending a party inside his friend's house. While inside, the man breaks into a locked bedroom and steals jewelry. The crime is discovered the next day, and the victim reports it to the police. Is it strong arm robbery? The element is missing. Is it burglary? Is it armed robbery? Okay, now, he was at a party, so it wasn't. So it wasn't burglary because, remember, he was invited in. So it's going to be theft. Oh, okay. The crime is not considered theft. Although the man did not give permission. Okay, I missed something. Oops, that's how you can miss it. Key thing here. It says because he did not have the owner's consent to enter the house the man did not have the permission in the locked bedroom. That's the point. Okay. So that's why it's burglary. It's because, remember, he was attending a party, but he went into a locked bedroom. So at that point, he committed burglary. Even the professionals can mess up on that one. All right. So it is not theft. It is burglary. If you submit it, it's correct because it was the locker room. See how you can get tricked? Okay. Finally, I'm going to do this one and then I'm going to be done here. A clerk working at a local gas station is approached by a masked man who points a gun at him. Give me all the money in the till. The clerk complies. The masked man flees. The clerk calls police, report the crime. What type of crime is it? You should already know. It's this one. Yep, because they threatened with a weapon. All right. And that's how those work. So that's a good exercise on knowing about that, and remember how you can get tricked, like yours truly was even tricked. Okay? But you have to read very carefully. That's one thing about the law. If you miss one aspect of it, it changes the result. And then finally, important, this quiz, don't skip it. Start activities, so you take the quiz. The unlawful entry into the dwelling of another without consent with intent to commit a robbery is known as what? Is it burglary? Yes. Is it trespassing? Probably not. Theft? It's going to be this one because your intent to commit a felony. That's the difference. All right? The violence involved. What crime is committed when someone points a weapon at another person while on a sidewalk and demands that person turn over their wallet? They got a weapon. It's not theft. It's not burglary. It's either strong arm robbery or it's armed robbery. But they pointed a weapon. So guess what? It's all the elements of armed robbery. Okay? So you do those, and they help you. All right? And so that's it for today. That's all the information I have. I'm going to go back into the lecture, and I am going to give you the key word, and the key phrase is property crime. Property crime. That's it. Provide that at the appropriate time and you'll receive your points. So with that, I'm going to say good night to you and see you next week.